So I begin by looking at the aura, and the aura is an energetic extension of where you are, and that shifts and changes. You might have seen those photographs with the kind of coloured blobs, and that's effectively what I see. This is going to be seemingly obvious from the outset, but I see a lot of blue around you, an awful lot of blue, very, very clear, very crisp, very clean, very unadulterated actually, which is great. And I'll explain why those words. But blue is invariably the colour of communication. One thing that I would say. There's three other things. One thing is that they're talking about a library, and again this is kind of metaphorical, but they are linking you with literature again and books and all of this kind of stuff, because they're talking about the Queen of Wands, and the Queen of Wands being a really, really good depiction of you, actually. And the Queen of Wands is typically quite creative, isn't afraid of having to spin lots of different plates at the same time. They're showing me, That's odd. At first I thought I was at the canal, but I don't think I am. I think that they're showing me a bridge, because there's a particular card in the deck that they're now showing me which has got a bridge in the background. They're showing me a bridge. They're showing me, in part, Golden Gate Bridge in America, and they're also showing me, in part, Amsterdam, the canals in Amsterdam. Okay. They're talking about Amsterdam with you quite strongly, actually. So this is a reading for Mel, and it is March of 2022. I know I've been chatting a bit, so please forgive me, but there's two things that I say on the recording, and I say this on every recording I've ever done. The work of an intuitive is only ever suggestions, so take what's helpful, leave what isn't. And the other thing is always get the messages to fit into your life rather than get your life to fit into the messages. When people get that back to front, it causes all sorts of tragedy and trouble. Okay. The other thing is the future isn't fixed. It's dependent on the actions and decisions and beliefs that we have in the present moment playing out. So for that reason, I don't work as a fortune teller, I don't work in definites, but I do work in opportunities, possibilities and probabilities. So yeah, good. So I begin by looking at the aura, and the aura is an energetic extension of where you are, and that shifts and changes. You might have seen those photographs with the kind of coloured blobs, and that's effectively what I see. This is going to be seemingly obvious from the outset, but I see a lot of blue around you, an awful lot of blue, very, very clear, very crisp, very clean, very unadulterated actually, which is great. And I'll explain why those words. But blue is invariably the colour of communication. The one thing that they're showing with you, and again, quite obvious with all this stuff, but they're showing me an antennae, or they're actually showing me a sword that's the Ace of Swords from the tarot. It's not here, but they're showing me the Ace of Swords, and this kind of lightning rod, this conductor rod, as it kind of lands. Now, swords in the tarot are about words, communication, thoughts and ideas. And this kind of lightning rod is about, in a slightly odd way, it's talking about you being a conduit. Now, what I mean by conduit is they're showing you, it's a bit of an odd thing to say, but they're showing you almost as a kind of fuse that you get in plugs. And it's slightly, and this is even more bizarre, but again, I'll explain it. They're slightly showing me Frankenstein's monster. Interestingly enough. Now, part of why they're doing that is that they're talking about they're showing me the temperance card. So they're talking about this process of experimentation you're in, and seemingly kind of stitching together different kind of things and creating. It doesn't have to be a monster. It could be something very, very pretty. It's a way for me to understand. But they're kind of stitching it together, and they're talking about you juxtaposing these different aspects and trying to shape and form something of your own making, something of your own creation, for want of a better term. And they're also showing me this kind of flip of the switch, a bit like in those old sci-fi movies where they kind of flip the switch and the electricity comes down and then goes through Frankenstein's monster and then it sits up. So this is in part about, this is a bit of a timing thing, and they're saying with you that the lightning bolt, in order to come in and wake that monster up, and by monster I mean, this is positive, it's something of your own making, we'll say. When that hits and strikes, then it sits up and kind of comes alive. Again, this is why they're using this metaphor. It's when that happens, what they're showing me is these little, you get them in springtime, where they look like little umbrellas, but they're seeds. Do you know the ones I mean? They've got the long thing with the seed on it, and these kind of little curly bits that come up, and they kind of catch the wind and they're off.
Yeah.
This is about what you're saying and what you're communicating being broadcast, actually going out. It's almost like they kind of scatter, but they scatter in a good way, that it permeates. I don't want to say necessarily globally, but it does. It kind of transports. It goes across land and sea, basically.
Oh, wow.
But the lightning bolt, as it comes in, they're kind of saying it's a bit alchemical. It's a bit, it's something outside of your control. Okay. Basically, it is kind of waiting for that lightning rod and waiting for the thunder to come down and strike. So all you can do is kind of stand outside with your lightning rod, trying to kind of grab the attention of it. So there's this double reaffirming for you of it will happen. Okay. You're just going to slightly wait, and this thing of it's slightly something that is outside of your control. It's not something, because sometimes they show me kind of people. They show me the Eight of Pentacles from the tarot, which has got the protagonist over the kind of working bench hammering away. So it's not so much about you. Yes, obviously you've got to work hard and put in the hours and put in the application, but it's not, the results don't come from that. It kind of comes. The words they're actually using, quite interestingly, is a stroke of genius. So it's probably more in an idea that is, in a way, okay, yes, thank you. Okay, good, thank you. In a way, is more about kind of strike of inspiration. It's something that hasn't been done before. It's slightly thinking outside the box. It's kind of one thing they're really, really reaffirming is it's not about copying what's already been done.
Okay.
And that's really, it's not about a kind of, particularly in a creative sense, it's not about going, well, I'm going to kind of do something similar than that and then kind of you're not at the photocopier. Okay. And then kind of printing it out. They're saying, actually, you need to do this process of, I'm going to take that kind of aspect of that, and I really like what they're doing over there, and I really am inspired by them, and bringing it all together, stitching it together, and then waiting for the lightning bolt to come through, and then it takes off. And there's also this when the lightning bolt comes and strikes the rod, there's a quickness within that. There's a mercurial nature of that. This is not about it taking a long, long time and slowly scaling up. They're showing you've done all of the amalgamation, you've brought all these things together. Then there's the flip of the switch, and then it's almost kind of overnight in a certain way, and then it comes alive. So it's quite dramatic. It's quite kind of you'll know when it's happening, but it's very, very positive because they're showing me the Tower card from the tarot, and often the Tower card, a lot of people fear it because they think, oh, it's about dismantling and kind of shocking news and all of that stuff. But in this instance, they're actually saying it's really, really positive because it's a bolt out of the blue, but a bolt out of the blue that brings enough energy into what it is you're doing to jumpstart it in a certain way. I know it's a bit odd. I'm not going to ask it anyway. Do you do any stuff with celebrities, or do you want to do any stuff with celebrities or anything like that?
Yeah, I want to. I don't at present.
Fine, good. I wouldn't be surprised if you do.
Wow.
That's what I would say, just because, again, the way that they're showing this lightning bolt is, again, if you haven't been able to tell so far, I work very clairvoyantly, so I work on all these images. It's kind of, they're weird and wonderful images, but they're a nice way to give information across. I'm seeing stars. I'm literally seeing kind of stars kind of jump out of this. So stars being celebrity stars and all of that stuff. And again, there's something about this being probably transatlantic.
Okay.
I would say. I think there's some kind of American aspect to it, but they're also taking you east. So probably Europe and America in some ways. But one thing they're really emphasising, Mel, is this isn't about you just doing one thing and one thing only. It is a kind of patchwork thing where you've got many different kind of elements to it. It's not just, for instance, interviewing.
Okay.
It's not just on that. It's kind of, yeah. And they're saying to me, it's like, some people might call it stealing, but it's not stealing, it's purely inspiration. But it is kind of, they're showing you, to me, it's almost like you're cutting out the bits that you... It's actually, interestingly enough, you're cutting out the bits you don't like of other people's work, and then keeping the bits that you do. So don't be afraid to kind of go, oh, that's really good, oh, that's really good, oh, that's really good. It's not emulating, you're just going, oh, I like the way that they do that, so you're bringing it together. And it's by the bringing it together that you will create something entirely new.
Okay.
So that's really, really important. The other thing that they've been talking about with you is English. I don't mean as in the kind of spoken language, because obviously you speak English. This is more in kind of written English or art history, or kind of... It's quite interesting. There's a kind of... there's something about English here. Let me just ask. Not necessarily about you writing a book or anything like that, although that might be part and parcel of it. I wouldn't discredit. Yeah, there is a kind of writing element to you as well, definitely. Again, that might kind of continue to grow. It's interesting because I don't necessarily know, but if I didn't know better, I'd almost kind of imagine you'd study something like English literature or art history. No, it doesn't matter if you didn't. But it's this kind of... the commonality between those two subjects is about... There's a kind of historical reference here with you in a certain way, and I wonder if again this is part of what will come through in your work, that there will be it's kind of cultural references in a certain way. It's not just necessarily about modernity. It's not always about the new. It's partly with you about how what has previously come also influences the present time. I can almost see you kind of collaging these videos or making these kind of videos that are that jump to the past and explain the history of how we kind of got to where we are now in a certain way. They're not documentaries. It's not kind of laboured like that. I wonder, and I mean this with great love, I wonder if part of that will be to prove to people that actually you've got brains. There's a kind of intelligence that comes through with that.
Okay.
And it's to stop people kind of necessarily assuming that there isn't a kind of depth in your skill set.
Okay.
So I think you slightly, and it's quite a good thing, but I slightly see you kind of flexing your muscles to prove that, no, I know what I'm talking about, thank you very much, I know what I'm doing, this isn't just kind of... It's always that thing where, because you kind of will work, you kind of working hard at it and kind of crafting it and cultivating it and kind of trying to make it, once we kind of have that bolt of lightning and Frankenstein's monster sits up, don't be surprised if you've got the aspersions of, oh, well, anybody could do that. And you can't. You have to have done all the background work that people don't see. What they see is the overnight success in a certain way, and they just think, oh, well, that could have come to anyone, and they don't see the kind of the graph. So there is this kind of, I know it's a slightly odd, but they're referencing Taylor Swift, of all people, but they're talking about her documentary that she did, Miss Americana, and it's quite interesting because she's kind of, she's showing her heft, she's showing her nous, her kind of, her intelligence through that medium. She's not just a kind of pretty girl that sings songs. You know, there's a lot of depth into it. One thing they've kept showing with you, and again this might be seemingly a little bit odd, they're showing you yes. Okay, good. They're showing you, it's very odd, it's not odd, it's a little, you might think this is a bit left field, is what I mean. They're showing you on this road, you have to bear with me with this, Mel, because it's going to take a little while to get to the message, but I have to give it kind of step by step. They're showing you on this road, and they're showing you with this road that your kind of car's broken down, or something like that. And it's a bit of a country lane, and it's at night. So you've got your boot open, because it's got the kind of warning hazard triangle on, and I can see you kind of standing out of your car, waiting for somebody to drive by. And... yes, okay, this is all metaphorical, by the way, this isn't literal. I just double checked, but yeah, it's metaphorical. When the person comes up to kind of stop and offer assistance, there's somebody driving, and it's interesting because I'm sitting in the driver's seat looking out, and I can see you kind of slightly waving somebody down. And I've got these headlights that are kind of beaming, and the mist is in the air, and it's very atmospheric, and it's very kind of... So, there's two levels to this image. Number one is... This is going to sound a bit like a criticism, and I don't mean it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm slightly... Just be mindful... are you familiar with the concept of archetypes?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Be mindful not to slip into the archetype of a damsel in distress.
Okay.
Don't... Sorry, I'm going to tell you off for just 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on. It's not really. It's said with great love. Don't... It's this, like, you're very capable, and you're intelligent, and you're very aware of what's going on. Sometimes, when we need assistance and help, we can kind of slightly fall into the damsel in distress mode, because then people kind of pay attention and kind of rally around to offer assistance.
Okay.
And actually, all they're saying is don't try and get people to help with something that you're perfectly capable of doing yourself.
Okay.
It sounds a bit harsh. I'm sorry. I don't mean it like that, because it's not. You know, you're not doing all this all the time in any ways. but when we've had a certain kind of, not learned behaviour, but when... It's quite nice for people to step in and kind of help us out. It's quite a nice thing to do. But they're just asking you, there are other ways to kind of get assistance or help.
Okay.
Please don't ever, and I don't think you do this, but this is to its extreme, and I'm only talking this in extreme, don't kind of act more unintelligent than you actually are.
Okay.
I don't think you do that so much, but there's a slight danger of you kind of, particularly when it comes to yeah, okay, thank you. They're saying don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed or fall into the stereotype of a damsel in distress. I'm going to ask if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense in a kind of factual sense, but you understand conceptually what I'm trying to talk about. Yeah, fine, good. Because I can just see the occasional thing where you've slightly intellectually clocked out with the assumption that somebody else will kind of step in and assist.
Okay.
And I think you're doing yourself a disservice there.
Okay.
I think the more that you can, don't be afraid to kind of go, no, I know what I'm doing, thank you very much. No, I've got this. No, I understand. It's don't be afraid to kind of show your intellectual brawn. Particularly when it comes to men. Particularly when it comes to men in a place of authority.
Okay.
The other thing to do with this image is... when I'm kind of in this car, it's a bit of a... This is, again, going to sound slightly unnerving, but it's absolutely fine. Again, we're slightly with the horror movies with you. It's quite funny. Yeah, no, it sounds really awful, but it's not at all. It's absolutely not. You probably... There will be a reason that they're making these horror movie references, but remember that they're movies.
Okay.
They're not... these aren't kind of real situations. It's kind of where they started off with Frankenstein because it's so kind of extreme. But this is slightly the kind of the beginning, you know, in those kind of jumper movies where they've kind of got the oh no, my car's broken down on a country lane and they're slightly, yeah, they're kind of, it's all pastiche. Please don't worry, you're going to be absolutely fine. There's nothing they're going to do. But it's also about somebody that's coming in to offer assistance that doesn't necessarily have your best interest at heart.
Okay.
I would say, again, it's very much a male energy rather than a female energy. Again, nothing untoward's going to happen at all. It's more just... they will be seemingly trying to kind of give you assistance, give you help. Again, this is more in a professional sense rather than a kind of in a relationship sense.
Okay.
That they're trying to kind of, they're literally showing it to you as somebody that's trying to, like you're trying to scale a wall and they kind of offer their hands for you to kind of put your foot into and try and scale the wall. They're saying that seemingly their intentions will be good and, oh yeah, no, I'm more than happy to help you. But actually, it's a little bit... they've got their own agenda.
Okay.
Basically. And again, that agenda's not nothing nefarious, it's nothing problematic, but there's just a disingenuousness that I'm trying to kind of safeguard you against, basically. So if you've got that instinct of, I don't know if they've really got my best interest at heart, there's something kind of... it's a bit, then just run with that, go with that instinct, and you just go, oh, thank you very much, it's very nice of you to offer, but I'm all right.
Okay.
Do you know, it's just kind of on that scale. Again, they're talking about kind of seemingly, as with everything in life, really, if the offer seems too good to be true, you kind of have to go, well, what's in it for you? And if they're quite kind of transparent about, well, actually, I want you to do it because we're going to make some money together and I'm going to take 50%. Fine, good. Okay,
Okay.
that's all above board, that makes sense. But if it's a case of, oh, I can get you this, I can put you this, I should put you this, and you think, but what are you getting in return? It's like, oh, no, I just want to help you out. And you're thinking, there's something... It's not to say that, all people are out to get you by any means. It's not so much that. But yeah, it is interesting. I'm going to say this one last time and then we're going to move on because it won't make much sense to you at the moment.
Okay.
But even as I look at the Eight of Cups and you've got this guy looking up at the full moon, I see the full moon and I see him kind of transforming into a werewolf, bizarrely. So there is this kind of slightly black and white kind of old school horror movie thing that keeps coming up around you. How that will come out to play, I don't quite know, but maybe this is a kind of an area that you'll start. I'm slightly trying to kind of put the pieces together, but maybe this is a case of something that you were asked to create a series about old Hollywood movies that are kind of those... They're horror movies, but they're very much the horror movies of the kind of... They're not the slasher kind. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of very... that kind of... You see the kind of old, kind of spiky lettering and the kind of the thunder and they're like... and it's all kind of slightly camp. And then they're kind of talking about that kind of element here. Very strongly, actually. Very, very strongly. Because they're even... I know this sounds a bit odd, but they're even kind of showing me... those... As a kid, when you go to Halloween parties, you get those clip-on teeth with the fangs and the kind of... they're slightly showing me all of that. They're showing me all of these kind of black and white, kind of old... kind of scary movies, so there's something in that comes in for sure. Definitely. Again, you might think, oh, there's a bit left field, but it's all good. It's all good. There's a kind of thing here about. I wouldn't be surprised if you end up meeting someone. It might be in a romantic sense, it might be in a kind of different sense that's kind of really into these types of movies.
Okay.
Because one thing that they're showing me, again, a bit odd, but they're showing me a young Johnny Depp. A very young version. So again, are you in a relationship at the moment? Yes.
Yeah.
I thought you were, because you've got the lovers. All I can say is it comes in, but it might come in a slightly unexpected way.
Okay.
So I'm just going to leave it at that bit. All I'm saying is it might be somebody else's interest that you end up finding. And it's kind of like, it's not something that I can suddenly see you overnight getting really into, but it does kind of come into your life for whatever reason. So
Okay.
we're just going to say that. One thing that I would say, there's three other things. One thing is that they're talking about a library, and again, this is kind of metaphorical, but they are linking you with literature again, and books, and all of this kind of stuff. Because they're talking about the Queen of Wands, and the Queen of Wands being a really, really good depiction of you, actually. And the Queen of Wands is typically quite creative, isn't afraid of having to spin lots of different plates at the same time. I see you, again this is metaphorical, but I see you almost as a waitress, kind of having to run and kind of do that and then kind of be there, and there's a kind of busyness, and you're almost having to be aware of lots of different things at the same time, and in a way kind of keeping lots of people happy.
Okay.
But I don't mind that. It's not like you, this doesn't fall into kind of people-pleasing territory at all. There's a kind of awareness of, there's some jobs that we can do where we don't kind of, it doesn't really matter if the person at the end of the line's getting a bit annoyed or that we, but I can see you in this environment having to be just, again, it's kind of noticing that the person right in the corner is getting a bit annoyed because they've waited for their check and you're like, oh, I'll be there in a moment, and that you're having to do this and then plan there. And It's about having to keep lots of different people happy all at the same time.
Okay.
But again, it's not about... it's nice with you because you want to do that quite naturally. You want to kind of make people kind of... It's people-pleasing, but not in a way that's a detriment to you. So I don't mind it. It doesn't... I don't feel as though that's where you kind of get yourself a sense of self-worth in kind of pleasing other people. It's just making sure that everybody that's in the room is happy. And I do see you kind of having to kind of dart around in a certain way. There probably at some point is going to be some sort of administrative work as well for you to do. It's kind of, yeah, you're very good at, you are, in a certain way, it is good for you to be quite dynamic. And what's quite nice is you do all of this different stuff without having to make a song and dance about it. You just get on with it. But I do understand why your attention might be split in lots of ways, because you're like, right, I've got to go, oh, I've got to, and this is kind of boyfriend, and then your boss, and then your dad, and then, so you're slightly kind of running around, not like a headless chicken, because you're in control, so it's good, but I can just understand why trying to keep lots of people content in that way is quite demanding. It's a bit like why waitresses should be kind of given Nobel Prizes, really, because it's not a job I'd want to touch for a million years, really, because no matter how much you kind of do, people still want more in a certain sense. And they're asking me to make you slightly aware of this, not because there's anything wrong with it or it needs to be adjusted, just be aware that does require a lot of energy, focus, and kind of, that's quite a big ask that you're kind of placing on yourself. You can do it, absolutely, it's just, that's only sustainable for so long in a certain way. So just be slightly mindful of that. And also they're saying to me, they're adding to this, don't be afraid to let a few balls drop. Don't necessarily worry about being a kind of grade A student across the board, because you are very good, you are very competent, and you want to do that. You don't like this thing about letting other people down, particularly in kind of promises and things that you like to follow through and make sure. And if somebody says, Mel, you've done this wrong, you go, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll correct it, and you'll kind of go, you're very, very good at that. But it's sometimes just make it a priority list. Make it kind of go, do you know what, I might not want to do admin for the rest of my life. So my boss, who's the admin, if he sometimes gets annoyed because I have to call in sick, or whatever, not call in sick, but it's kind of, if I have to only give 70% to that so that I've got an extra 30% to give to the stuff that I really want to do, then it's fine. They're just slightly asking you to... Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry, I was going to give a metaphor that they hadn't actually given, and I thought, am I making this up? And they said, no, you can carry on with it, it's absolutely fine. What you're doing at the moment, a little bit, and again, this is not a criticism, really isn't a criticism. They're kind of, this again, slightly an odd analogy, but I'll explain why they're using this analogy in a moment. But you're kind of slightly spraying manure all across the field. And that's great, because fields to me are very much the Seven of Pentacles is agricultural land. It's things that we can plant and grow. They often use fields as a depiction for our own efforts. So that's why they're showing it to me like this. But they're saying to me, in a way, sometimes you need to be selective about what parts of the field you give more compost to than others. And tend and harvest and grow the plants that you actually want to grow. At the moment, it feels like you're a little bit trying to kind of grow the sweet corn, grow the potatoes, grow the thing. You're slightly giving yourself equally to everything.
Okay.
And that's good in many ways, but at the same time, what do you actually want to grow?
Okay.
Are you interested in growing potatoes? Probably not. You're probably more interested in trying to cultivate the Chelsea Flower Show. You want something that's beautiful and not so much functional. Think about beauty in that respect, and I don't mean beauty as in kind of makeup and beauty, and but feel free. More just what makes your heart sing. What do you want to look at? What do you actually want to grow? And figure that out and then post your manure there. And again, the other people that might get a bit disgruntled because you've taken away less of the compost from that area to put it on there. Sorry to say, Sodom.
Okay.
Little bit. I just feel that you can, in particular areas where you think, actually, this isn't what I want to do, you can just bring it down by 20%.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that suddenly collapses or crumbles. You don't have to commit yourself in quite the way that you have done. They're showing me That's odd. At first I thought I was at the canal, but I don't think I am. I think that they're showing me a bridge. Because there's a particular card in the deck that they're now showing me which has got a bridge in the background. They're showing me a bridge. They're showing me, in part, Golden Gate Bridge in America. And they're also showing me, in part, Amsterdam. The canals in Amsterdam.
Okay.
They're talking about Amsterdam with you quite strongly, actually. Very, very strongly. The more I look at it, the more crisp and clear it becomes. But they're showing me this bridge. It's a very particular bridge. And this is a literal thing now.
Okay.
We're going into the realm of the literal now. It's not metaphorical. I wouldn't be surprised if you visit there or go there or do some kind of work there. I think it's Chicago more than New York, but I wouldn't bet my bottom dollar on it. It's one of the two. It's either Manhattan Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge. You have to double check where Golden Gate Bridge is and just let me know. But they're linking you with there, quite interestingly enough. They're putting you in quite a... I don't quite understand this, because they're putting you in quite a glitzy dress with a microphone, but I don't feel that is literal.
Okay.
So that's what's slightly kind of throwing me. The location is literal, but the kind of job that is there isn't. It's interesting because I've worked with, quite recently, quite a well-known TV presenter that kind of interviews people.
Okay.
And I kind of thought, oh, are we looking at this? But it's... it's going to be a bit annoying, Mel, because it kind of is and it kind of isn't. I don't quite understand what I'm looking at 100%.
Okay.
But they are showing me... it's slightly confusing, because everything that I'm going to say is going to sound like I'm pinning it down, but I'm actually not. It's slightly confusing. But they're showing me... an award ceremony, but I don't quite understand it, because it's not, at least from my interpretation, it's not about you kind of standing there with a film camera and getting people to kind of talk to the camera. I don't feel like that's so much where you go. No, I don't, because again, they're talking about this kind of Frankenstein monster, which is something about what you're doing is a little bit more ingenious. It's not kind of cookie cutter of you're just going into something that already exists. It's about you kind of creating your own thing.
Okay.
But they are showing me this kind of award ceremony, so I don't quite understand it.
Okay.
But I'm going to give it to you anyway, because they're showing it to me. And then the other thing is about Amsterdam. very, very much. I've never been myself, so I don't really know, but they showed me lots of pots, so I know where I am. Lots of hashish. This might end up being somewhere that you go with your partner, oddly enough. That feels slightly more recreational than work. But there's something quite great about that trip. There's something there's something, I wouldn't say necessarily significant, but they wouldn't show me just a week in Spain if it didn't really have any, if it's just a nice holiday, they wouldn't really mention it. But there's something a little bit more significant about, but it's particularly the canals. It's 100% the canals, because I know that there's loads of bikes and and I see you there as well, kind of slightly doing these kind of quite fun poses and this kind of photographs. But I'm seeing this, you're kind of the age that you are now, so this isn't kind of years down the line, whereas the Golden Gate Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge feels a bit more kind of slightly further down.
Okay.
Further down the line. But there's also something about, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if you live near the canal or a canal. Then they're talking, because again they're showing you this kind of narrow road, and they're showing you kind of, there's a living situation about the canal. Don't quite understand it, and again, don't worry too much at the moment, but they're talking about a kind of move, and particularly again with your partner in that kind of respect. Okay, so at this point I'm going to say, what's going on, how can I help, what would you like me to look at that I haven't already done so, what would you like me to expand upon, is there anything within there that kind of didn't make any sense at all and you want me to revisit, or what do you need?
Okay. I think I'm most interested in career though, and growth and stuff like that, so quite
that's where they've kind of been focusing. Yes,
yeah.
Because it's the kind of transition period for a while that might take a bit of time for you to kind of basically make this work financially. It might take a little while, but not endless at all. But it is interesting because I don't feel that this kind of stuff is sorry, by this I mean, you know what I mean, it's lovely and great, it's just energetically this kind of represents it. One thing that they're saying very, very strongly is that it won't just be this.
Okay.
There will be other things alongside it. I think that you working for yourself is great. I think that you're going to move more and more into that sense. I don't see you kind of working in a big... Actually, no, I was about to say not working in a big corporation, but I think at a time you probably will, but in very much on your own terms. I don't feel like you're going into a corporate office and kind of just a cog within the machine, so to speak. But there probably is some kind of television stuff at some point, not so much front of camera, this is slightly more behind camera. It's not so much a kind of television studio, it's kind of what I'm seeing, but it's more it's not film, it's not television where it's kind of filmed on location stuff. If it's like studio, I can almost see the people kind of sitting on the couch. It's a bit like I'm in the BBC News studio, and they're kind of, and everywhere's dark, and then over there's the light with the kind of red couch and stuff. So it'd probably be slightly more in that way. There's the things about books and literature and this kind of... It's quite interesting working with you because it's not one thing. There's kind of it's slightly patchworked, a bit like the Frankenstein monster. So it's kind of all of the... So it's slightly difficult to distinguish where one ends and one begins a little bit, but it's absolutely fine. So what are you working on currently? What's kind of your work landscape, and then you can kind of go from there.
I had loads at once.
Yes. Yes.
But it's interesting you touched on the writing, because I did start a book, but then I think I get bored. Not bored. I get distracted very easily, and then start another project, and then forget the book, and then go somewhere else, and then try this on the side, and then try something similar but different on the side, and then my actual job, and then there's lots at once.
It's interesting. The first thing that came to mind when you sat down and walked in was, writer. She's writing something. It's book stuff, again, with all the blue and the communication. I don't put that book, don't mothball it for too long.
Okay.
It's absolutely fine. I do feel as though if you end up with a book, I don't think it's so much a novel. I don't think that it's so much a kind of fiction in a certain way. I think this will probably be slightly more non-fiction, a bit more... I'm trying to find the right descriptors for it. This is the way I'm going to describe it. But I don't kind of mean this. It's much more sophisticated than this. But it's kind of, when... okay, I get it. Okay, thank you. I get it. Okay. Because I thought, this is very odd. That's a very odd kind of reference point. Is Trinny and Susanna. You ever remember Trinny Susanna? It might be before your time. God, that makes you feel old.
Is it a cleaning show?
No, that was Kim and Aggie.
Yeah.
But, we'll use the Kim and Aggie thing, because it still works. It's slightly cooler, because Trinny and Susanna were stylists. They were like TV stylists, and I think they did something called What Not to Wear or something like that.
Yeah, I do remember.
And they had their TV programme, but what they also had was the book that accompanied it. Okay. And they had all their tips that they were talking about. So they'd have a photograph of her, like, in a tragic outfit, and then the next page would be the good outfit. And it was a bit more... It was a kind of informative book, but it was a kind of... Not quite coffee table, but not quite kind of reference book. It was kind of this... that's the kind of thing, I think, with you. It's slightly more in that sphere. So it's a bit more that the book reflects your other work. Okay. It's a kind of natural extension of it, rather than something that is kind of entirely separate and you've written a kind of crime novel, but you're also doing this, and they kind of go, oh, did you know that? There feels a bit more of a kind of crossover, if that makes sense. But I see a fair decent amount of travel with you, kind of vocationally. There'll be some exciting little trips out and about. There's money. Yeah, don't worry. That's one of the other things they told me, and I kind of dropped. But they're showing me a kind of pile of coins here. It might not be, at the moment, raining pennies from heaven. It might not kind of... that could come. Why not? No reason it couldn't. But this stuff there's much more to it than you've unlocked at the moment, and that's fine. Don't worry about that. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's just it's much more complex. There's more facets to it to be discovered. But yeah, they're really saying to me in my ear, what is it about that is going to be unique? So look at that. Okay. I think it's more, Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. One thing that they're saying is this a documentary of you and your stuff and what you're interested in, or is it interviews?
Okay.
And that's what you slightly need to land on. I think there's more energy when you start bringing other people in.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, no, a lot.
Good.
There's a lot.
Good. Yes, there is a lot in there. So it's good that you've got the recording because you can keep coming back.
Yeah.
There's this thing with Amsterdam with you, big time. It's really
I
interesting.
wonder what it is.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. It is just a trip. It's not a relocation or anything like that. But they just keep dropping it in. Fabulous.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Absolute pleasure. It was lovely to read you. There's some really great stuff. Really great stuff. You just need to slightly, ever so slightly, it's a little bit, just a little bit. They're showing you kind of slightly sat at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come along.
Okay.
And they're saying, actually, if the bus hasn't come within half an hour, you might just need to get up and walk. So what they mean by that is just don't necessarily wait for opportunity to knock. Go and look for it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't feel as it's more going to be the ball's going to start rolling once you start doing it with it. And it's great. It's not on this stuff because this is great. You're doing this and figuring that out, and that's great. It's more on this kind of vocational job. Although this is vocational job in more your kind of 9-to-5 job stuff.
Okay.
And there's something about these horror movies, but anyway, we'll see how that lands. Oh boy,
Thank you.
You're very welcome.